Welcome back to Cinema Wellman. I am your host, David, and today we are once again going to pick a city and shine our cinematic spotlight on it and some of the magnificent films that were shot there over the years. Today's city spotlight is on New York City, which is why, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice that I'm wearing my Lady Liberty New York Rangers jersey. So today is all about New York City, the Big Apple, Gotham, Empire City, the City of Dreams, the city that never sleeps, Fun City, the city so nice they named it twice. Big City, lots of nicknames, and lots of movies. Lots and lots of movies. On today's episode of Cinema Wellman, Ghostbusters, Goodfellas, Manhattan, The Apartment, Prince of the City, 25th Hour, Taxi Driver, Rosemary's Baby, Shaft, and Saturday Night Fever will not be discussed. Those great films didn't even make the list, which shows you how many deserving candidates there were. I was born and raised in New York State. Since I lived north of the city, about 63 miles north, I told people that I lived in upstate New York. I then met someone from Oswego, New York, who corrected me. I was close enough to visit New York City fairly easily, but I never lived there. I'm not much of a city guy. As the saying goes, I love to visit, but, you know. To help me narrow down my New York City film choices, I asked my good friend John, who lived in New York City for 17 years. He's been by my side for more than, 95% of my adult visits to New York City. John knows his way around New York and is an exceptional tour guide, especially if you're looking for a good hot dog stand or a falafel truck at 2:30 in the morning. So John and I got together and sat down with my original list of over 25 films. And I explained my criteria for being placed under Cinema Wellman's City Spotlight microscope. And he helped me narrow it down to 10 over a few adult beverages. I'd like to thank John for not only his help on this project, but the countless good times I've had with him in the greatest city in the world over the years. Before we get to the film, I'd like to repeat my intentions with this series. Once the location is chosen, I look for films that not only take place there, but were shot there. Location shooting is a must, and that eliminated some very well-known New York films because they really weren't filmed in New York City. Exteriors, yes, and exteriors are nice, but when everything else is shot on a studio lot somewhere, some of the magic gets lost. Along with location shooting, the city needs to be an active part of the film. It has to be treated almost like an additional member of the cast. And I look for films that capture the essence of a particular city. As a young man, many of my trips into New York City were with my Uncle Frank. He'd take me to Mets or Yankees games a couple times a summer, and it was always magical, even though we went to Shea. Uncle Frank would always say the same thing as we crossed the George Washington Bridge to enter the city. He would look at me in all seriousness and say, "Into the belly of the beast." I'll never forget that. So let's get in that belly. Let's start with number 10, and it's from 1961. It's 153 minutes long, so it's a long one, and it gets a 7.6 on IMDb, and it is West Side Story. So we start with a movie that features an overture. You gotta love an overture. It means you're in for something epic. The opening aerial shots of the city are tremendous, especially since New York City looked very different in 1961. It's a great opening for a great film. West Side Story has one of the highest Oscar winning percentages ever. It was nominated for 11 Academy Awards and won 10 of them. The only one it failed to take home was for writing. It won Best Picture, Best Supporting Actress, Rita Moreno, Best Supporting Actor, George Chakiris, and Best Director, shared between Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins. It was the first time Best Director honors were shared between two directors, and it didn't happen again until Joel and Ethan Coen for No Country for Old Men. West Side Story, the music and the songs are, of course, legendary and very familiar. We're also especially familiar with the story. That's an updated version of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, since it was recently updated by Steven Spielberg. West Side Story shows us a city that's divided by racial hatred and distrust. It also shows a city that is alive, vibrant, and filled with passion. and passionate people. Not entirely shot on location, but I give it a pass. That's understandable since it's a musical. Those huge set pieces with choreographed dancing by dozens and dozens of dancers can't really be done on a real street during a regular day. You just can't light it, for one thing. That being said, it certainly captures the essence of New York City, and that's what the City Spotlight is all about, and that's why it leads off for us today. Next up, number 9, from 1975, 98 minutes long, 6.7 on IMDb, Prisoner of Second Avenue. Anything written by native New Yorker Neil Simon that takes place in New York City is always a treat. One of my favorites, The Odd Couple, certainly comes to mind when you think of Simon and New York City. Let's start from IMDb. A suddenly unemployed company executive suffers a nervous breakdown, and his supporting wife tries to console him and pick up the slack. The couple are magnificently played by Jack Lemmon and Anne Bancroft, another native of New York City. Now, you're going to hear me say that a lot during this episode because these filmmakers were smart enough that they use a lot of native New Yorkers to act in the films. Brilliant. It should happen all the time in all places, and then we wouldn't have the mess that was The Departed and those horrendous Boston accents. You could have found actors and actresses who were from Massachusetts. All right, so in Prisoner of Second Avenue, the usual Big Apple gripes are here on full display. Noise pollution, crime, they get robbed, job insecurity, the lure of the suburbs. His brother lives in the suburbs and everything's great. Rude neighbors, everything you'd expect in a New York City comedy. Jack Lemmon and Anne Bancroft are wonderful as Mel and Edna Edison. Emmett Walsh is a doorman in this movie of their building, and it made me think, I think I would have been a good doorman back in the day. Hailing cabs for people and, opening doors. Hello, hey, how are you? Good morning. In any event, and Sylvester Stallone shows up briefly in this as the suspected mugger. Edna goes to work after Mel loses both his job and his marbles. When Edna loses her job, things really began to unravel. This comedy has a mixed message about mental health and therapy, addressing the need for it and the possible help it could offer, but also relying on the same old negative jokes occasionally, so it's a mixed bag in that department. New York City is portrayed as a sometimes frustrating place to live, especially dealing with the people there. But the city isn't really shown as an antagonist. That being said, this isn't exactly a love letter to New York City either. Absolutely worth seeing just to see Anne Bancroft and Jack Lemmon together. Let's go to number 8 from 1979. It's The Warriors, and it's 93 minutes long, so it's a good one. Nice tight action movie, 7.5 on IMDb. It opens with the Wonder Wheel and Coney Island. Coney Island is home to the Warriors, and after they're wrongly accused of assassinating a charismatic rival gang leader, all they want to do is get home. I read up about these movies all the time, and I read that former President Reagan was a big fan of this film, and he called star Michael Beck to tell him. Well, I don't know, go figure. The Warriors are being hunted by every gang in the city. I'd read the list. I know that I included it in a previous blog. I'd read you the list. It's way too long. You can Google it. It's amazing. And it's really long. These gangs are wildly colorful, and some of them are downright terrifying. I'm looking at you, baseball furies. The shoot for the Warriors took 60 days from midnight to 8 a.m., in the summer of 1978. Some real gang members were hired to appear in the film in order to keep the peace and keep the gang from disrupting the shoot. One gang did invade the set one day during lunch and trash the place, breaking some equipment. Coney Island is home in this film, and the rest of the city and its gang inhabitants are in full hunt mode. Every street, every alley, every subway line has trouble in store for the Warriors. Warriors, come out and play. That line was ad-libbed, by the way. Number 7 from 1985, we have Martin Scorsese's After Hours. Gets a 7.6 on IMDb. The idea that New York City is impossible to navigate and filled with lunatics is certainly backed up by After Hours. The New York City in this film is totally different than in the other films, with the possible exception of the Warriors. I chose this film by native New Yorker director Martin Scorsese over both Goodfellas and Taxi Driver because of how the director uses the city, and in this case Soho specifically, as an antagonist for the entirety of the movie. Paul Hackett, played by another native New Yorker, Griffin Dunn, goes out for a seemingly low-key evening. He's reading alone in a coffee shop when he meets Marcy, Rosanna Arquette, native New Yorker. When Paul meets Marcy, his evening and his life begin to descend into a world of chaos. Paul loses his money, so he has no way to get home. He meets up with character after character, and one is more outrageous than the other. Paul rides in a death cab with a psychotic cab driver. He also deals with a strict subway worker who won't let him by in the middle of the night without the exact change with the new fare. It just went up. Paul just wants to go home, but Soho won't let him escape. An outstanding supporting cast. Terry Garr, watch out for her. She has a rodent problem. Linda Fiorentino, Verna Bloom, Cheech and Chong, all those people make this a wild ride, well worth an after-hours screening some night. Next at number 6, it's from 1989, and it gets an 8.0 on IMDb, 2 hours long. From Spike Lee, we have Do the Right Thing. New York City is currently home to over 8.5 million people. The city has always prided itself on being a melting pot of nationalities and cultures. That would be a metaphorical melting pot, because when temperatures soar during the summer months, New York can become a literal melting pot. And when temperatures soar, tempers flare. Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing is an honest look at race relations in a neighborhood in Brooklyn's Bed-Stuy area during a sweltering summer day. I remember growing up north of the city and hearing about oppressive heat waves hitting them from time to time. I always felt so bad for those people crammed together in that noisy place, especially without any air conditioning. During those heat waves, the news was always filled with stories of violence and crime. And you look at the crime statistics in any major city, when the temperatures rise, violence and crime also rise. This, along with the simmering hatred between the races, is at the heart of Lee's Do the Right Thing. The film begins with co-star newcomer Rosie Perez. Rosie Perez got an introducing credit in Do the Right Thing. So it starts with Rosie Perez dancing to Public Enemy's Fight the Power in front of a neighborhood background. It is absolutely amazing. When I was done rescreening this last week, I started it over from the beginning just to watch that open again. I read that it took 8 hours to shoot that opening. Rosie was in terrific shape. Rosie Perez, you know what I'm going to say, another native New Yorker, is wonderful in this film, as are Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis. That pair makes me smile every time I see them in anything. Mr. Davis's voice is as smooth and even as maple syrup being poured on a stack of flapjacks. Dee and Davis play mother, sister, and the mayor, respectively. It's interesting to see how revered mother's sister is by the neighborhood, while the mayor is disrespected and sometimes taunted by the neighborhood teenagers. Yet another native New Yorker, Danny Aiello, is the owner of a pizza restaurant in Bed-Stuy. He's been in business for over 25 years in the same location and runs the restaurant with his sons, John Turturro and Richard Edson. John Turturro is a native New Yorker. We see things simmering in the heat for a while before tempers reach a boiling point and tragedy strikes. Parts of this are difficult to watch, and for that reason, Do the Right Thing should be required viewing when it comes to race relations in an urban setting. As the song says, nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Lee doesn't take sides here, he just tells it like he sees it. He also ends the film with 2 quotes by the great African-American civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. Well done, Spike. The time is always right to do the right thing. Amen to that. Let's go to number 5. from 1975. Also gets an 8 on IMDb. And you've heard me talk about it before, and it's Dog Day Afternoon. So this is the third time I've had an opportunity to talk about Dog Day Afternoon. And it actually caused me to create a database. Oh, you know how I hate that. Of films that I've talked about in episodes of Cinema Wellman. I don't want to keep talking to you about the same movies over and over. Dog Day Afternoon was featured in Season 1, Episode 20, The 70s Show, Part 2, and Season 2, Episode 14, Where's the Music? Scoreless Movies. And it absolutely belonged on those lists, and I can't imagine a New York movie list without it here, so here it is again. Hopefully I won't be repeating myself too much. I tried to come up with some new info for you. Native New Yorker, Al Pacino plays Sonny, an amateur bank robber whose plans go south very quickly when he and his partner Sal, the late great John Cazale, attempt to rob a Brooklyn bank. What follows is a circus that only New York City can produce. The botched robbery becomes an attraction not only at the site, but also in the media. Charles Durning, who is adored here at Cinema Wellman, plays the cop assigned to deal with Sonny and the crowd. I have no idea how Durning spoke after shooting this film. He yells at least half of his lines. He screams them. He's shouting at everyone. Even though the movie takes place during the summer, it was filmed from September to November of 1974. So for some of the outside scenes on particularly cold days, the actors would place ice cubes in their mouths before the take so their breath wouldn't be visible because their mouths were cold and so was the air. Brilliant. The citizens and the city are definitely characters in this great movie that manages to be very funny and very sad intermittently. This is an amazing film directed by Sidney Lumet, who I wish was from New York City, and I have a feeling that it might show up at Cinema Wellman again in the future. It certainly fits into a lot of categories. Let's move on to number 4 from 1957. Another film that gets an 8.0 on IMDb. It's Sweet Smell of Success. Now, there's a chance that this is the only movie on this list that you're not familiar with. No worries. I think Sweet Smell of Success is very underrated. More people should see it and talk about it. I'll go first. Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster, both native New Yorkers. And again, I have to stop here to reiterate how important that is to lending authenticity to these characters. These people were born and raised in this city, and they are playing characters who are part of this same city. It's fantastic. So Tony Curtis and Burt Lancaster are top billed in this compelling film that reveals the ugliness of the entertainment industry. Curtis plays Sidney Falco, a sleazy press agent. Lancaster is absolutely menacing as powerful and extremely unethical Broadway columnist J.J. Hunsaker. The conversations between the two in this film are unbelievably amazing. The writing by Clifford Odets includes some of my all-time favorite movie lines. Here's just a couple. You're dead, son. Get yourself buried. That JJ said that. This one, Sidney Falco says this. The cat's in the bag and the bag's in the river. Reminds me of my neighbor Billy Pushman for other reasons. And this is a classic movie line. I'd hate to take a bite out of you. You're a cookie full of arsenic. JJ says that to Sidney. Sweet Smell of Success was shot in black and white, and that makes the city come alive, especially since much of the film was shot at night. The GOAT of cinematographers, James Wong Howe, shot this with director Alexander McKendrick at the helm. New York City is very dark and foreboding in this film, and J.J. Hunsaker is shot by Howe in a manner that suggests that he lords over it all. Susan Harrison plays JJ's younger sister, and she got an introducing credit. She's really the only character here worth rooting for. She and her saxophone-playing boyfriend, played by Martin Milner, who's accused of smoking those jazz cigarettes in a smear campaign by JJ. I was way late to this party. There's an oddball character in one of my favorite movies, Diner, who walks around reciting the dialogue to an old movie. That movie is Sweet Smell of Success. I had never heard of it when I saw Diner in 1982, but I've made up for lost time. Please seek out and see Sweet Smell of Success. You'll need to shower after it to wash off some of the sleaze, but you will love this movie. Let's go to number 3 on our list of Big Apple movies from 1993, and it garners a 7.9 on IMDb, and it's Carlito's Way. And I'm very happy that I decided to rescreen all of these films to prepare for this episode. I had forgotten how great this movie really is. Al Pacino is Carlito, and Sean Penn, who is amazing, plays his ultra scummy lawyer friend, David Kleinfeld. Carlito is fresh out of prison and hoping for a new start, a new legal business opportunity, and love with an old girlfriend, Gail, played by Penelope Ann Miller. Yeah, that old girlfriend thing doesn't really work out. Unfortunately, Carlito's hopes collide with the real world and his old world. Once again, we have a Pacino character that's being drawn into the underworld, once again, just like in the Godfather saga. The scenes shot in Grand Central Station are absolutely, they're amazing, as Carlito races to meet up with Gail at the train while being chased by several men who want to kill him. Carlito's narration over segments of the film is very touching, and it gives an extra insight into this character, who is masterfully played by Al Pacino when he could still act and didn't shout all of his lines. Let's go to number 2. It's from 1974, 7.6 on IMDb, and it's The Taking of Pelham 123. I'll let IMDb lead this one off. 4 armed men hijack a New York City subway car and demand a ransom for the passengers. The city's police are faced with a conundrum. Even if it's paid, how could they get away? The Taking of Pelham 123 boasts 4 native New Yorkers. Walter Matthau and Jerry Stiller play police lieutenants, while Martin Balsam and Hector Elizondo play 2 of the hijackers. The leader of the hijackers is played by Robert Shaw. Shaw's Mr. Blue is cold, calculating, cruel, and he's willing to kill innocent passengers if his demands aren't met. He is one dude you should not mess with. This is an excellent cat and mouse thriller. Matthau and Shaw try to outwit each other as lives hang in the balance. There's a terrific chase sequence without it being an actual chase, as police officers race against time to deliver the ransom to Mr. Blue. I love how the city seems to cooperate with these productions, for a cost, of course, and allow them access to shooting in very public and popular areas. Or in the case of Pelham 123, they gave them access to subway stations and tunnels that had been closed for close to 30 years. The ending of this movie is the cinematic equivalent of the chef's kiss. The look on Walter Matthau's face is just classic. And that leaves us with one film left. From 1971, there's a big shipment coming in, and everybody's going to get well. IMDb gives it 7.7, and it's William Friedkin's The French Connection. And the film opens in Marseille, and the way that city is shot, it's just as beautifully shot as New York. Could be another city spotlight. When we first see Popeye Doyle, played by Gene Hackman, he's undercover as Santa Claus on a street corner ringing a bell. Within a minute, he's in full foot pursuit, trying to run down a criminal. This New York City is seedy, gritty, dirty, and rife with gangsters and other criminals. There are great location shot sequences in an auto graveyard and down at the docks as the ships are being unloaded. Every time I see this, I forget that Popeye Doyle does this chase, the classic chase scene in The French Connection, in a commandeered car. He flags somebody down and takes their car. So it's not a police car and it's not his car. He takes somebody's car and goes on this chase, and he's chasing a train. I'm not sure if that had ever been done before without horses. And Bill Hickman is back. Bill Hickman, the great stunt driver and sometimes actor, from Bullitt, he's back, and he plays a cop, and he also did some of the stunt driving for Hackman in the iconic chase sequence in The French Connection. It was shot from November 1970 to January 1971. Winters in New York City can be particularly bleak and desolate and filthy. That white snow isn't white for long. One of my favorite parts is when they take apart the entire car looking for heroin. It's obviously in the last place that they look. How they not check the rocker panels first? And when they give the car back to him, it's totally put back together. I love that. This doesn't happen often in major and successful and well-known movies, but it's one of the odd times, and spoiler alert coming, I hope you've seen The French Connection, but the bad guy gets away. But I guess that's why we got The French Connection 2. Directed by the great William Friedkin, and he tried to outdo his epic car chase from this in 1985's To Live and Die in L.A. And he came pretty close. This movie really isn't dated at all. It stands the test of time, and it's definitely worth a second look. Or fifth or eighth. All right, well, that's it. Our cinematic tour of New York City has come to an end. Thank you so much for getting on the bus with us. And stay tuned in the future for more City Spotlight episodes. We may go to Europe for the next one later in the summer. Coming next week, Cinema Wellman's June screenings, the best and the worst. We hope you'll join us for that. Thank you again for watching, listening, reading, subscribing, all that stuff. So until next week, take care.